Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look at the stories that graced all of our platforms over the past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside reporters Luke Mandato and Quinton Amundson. This week's episode is brought to you by Connaissance Travel and Tours, your trusted Catholic-owned and operated Canadian expert in transformative pilgrimage tours. Visit connaissancetravel.com, and we will visit Connaissance a little later in this podcast, but first we have to have a quick chat on our beloved Blue Jays. Apparently, we didn't pray enough for them, I guess we only prayed up to about the eighth inning. And after that, the Dodgers took over and in 11 innings brought our guys down, unfortunately. Even our crossword puzzle guru, Bob Carson, out in Edmonton, he he apologized to me for not praying enough, but that's okay, Bob. We won't hold it against you. But Quinton, you tell me someone was praying for the Blue Jays.
Somebody very influential in the Catholic Church, the Pope himself, Leo the 14th, had a brief audience with Peter Meehan, the president of St. Jerome's University, overseas for a university president's conference. And Meehan was very keen on talking with the Pope about baseball. And the Pope relayed to him that he was with Canadian baseball fans during that very thrilling World Series.
Yes. Yeah, well, I guess the Pope didn't help. Who was going to help the Blue Jays? Oh, well. So, we'll step away from a little bit of that sad news. I know that most of Toronto is, I guess, starting to recover from it now, and probably the rest of the country. But what we do is we go to some joyful news for some hundred or so pilgrims from the Archdiocese of Toronto, and one pilgrim in particular from Calgary. That would be Quinton, who will be joining the Archdiocese of Toronto's Jubilee pilgrimage to Rome this year, which is being coordinated for the Archdiocese by our friends at Connaissance Travel. So, Quinton, you are heading off just in a few days, heading into Rome. How about you tell us about the conversation you had with Father Tim Hanley, who is the point man for the pilgrimage, and what's going to be happening?
It's going to be a very exciting, jam-packed week, and Father Tim Hanley is going to be spiritually directing the experience alongside Cardinal Leo. So there will be Mass celebrated every single day. There will be opportunities to have Eucharistic celebrations with the Pope. We'll be able to go to Assisi to experience St. Francis's hometown, where also has the tomb of St. Carlo Acutis. But I think a major foundational element is going to be visiting the major papal basilicas and walking through the holy doors. And in addition to these basilicas being architectural treasures, there, of course, is spiritual significance to walking through the holy doors. And during my conversation with Father Tim Hanley, he really talked about the spirit that he hopes all the pilgrims will have as they enter through those doors. And we share that part of the conversation with you now.
Crossing the threshold into a new world of hope. And so it's not only a physical crossing of a door into a basilica, four basilicae that are full of history, but we must move our hearts to cross the threshold from where we are to move them even deeper in union with Christ and deeper in probing the hope that Christ gives us.
When Father Tim Hanley is talking about that threshold of hope when you cross through the door, that is something that Pope John Paul II famously said during the previous Jubilee in 2000. And he wants us to not only come into hope with a better relationship of Jesus Christ, but also going on a sense of hope in the way that we can serve the church, particularly with the poor. It's going to be the Eucharistic celebration of the poor coming up at the Vatican. So I think that's very good spiritual mindset that he wants all the pilgrims, including myself, to adopt every time we step through a holy door. So it's going to be a very powerful experience with the Cardinal Leo and Father Hanley leading the way.
That sounds great, Quinton. I wanted to ask you maybe what the mood was like during your call with Father Tim Hanley. I think I was one of the first people to speak with him actually back last fall when he was announced as sort of the head man for this year's Jubilee in the Archdiocese of Toronto. And at that time, he didn't really have all the information yet about any of these pilgrimages or really some of the events that have been taking place throughout this year. But during that time, he was always very excited. I remember during our conversation, just this sense of joy and excitement. Now that we've kind of traveled through the year and we're looking to end off with some of these fantastic pilgrimages, what was his mood like during your conversation with him?
I think he's very excited, Luke, about the nature of the week, and he wants people to embrace all of it. As you know, with a big group of 100 people, there are likely going to be bumps along the way. There are going to be, things that might not necessarily play out exactly the way that you plan, and you want to embrace the bumps along the way. There are moments of grace. There are moments to maybe really get to know each other and come together as a group. So, I mean, there's going to be, of course, a lot of highs at the places that we're going. But in the moments where there may be delays here and there, they want us to embrace the wonderness of that as well.
Well, that's the thing that I'm sure you're looking for. Just and everyone you've talked to that goes to Rome, they just it's breathtaking, everything about it. And in fact, I'm going to be there in just in the days before you arrive. I'm going to spend basically the weekend in Rome before going off to a few other places in Europe. And I'm amazed at what I'm going to see. And that's without even seeing it, and I'm already amazed. So I can imagine what it'll be like after that. So, but it's these pilgrimages. It's great for this 100 people that are going to it. But for this whole Jubilee year, we've been covering pilgrimages in Toronto. And in fact, I know, Luke, you've written many of our stories about pilgrimages. What have you got to say about what's happened here at home?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and it was kind of a shock at first when you start looking at these stories, is just how many people take advantage of these opportunities, right? It's something beforehand you hear of a pilgrimage and you think, I'm not sure how many people would be interested in that, but we see the people show up and they show up in numbers, whether it's hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands over the years that take on these pilgrimages here in Canada. I think one of the big ones that comes to mind is Martyr's Shrine, of course, in Midland, Ontario here. Uh, this August, they had their pilgrimage, their annual Archdiocesan pilgrimage there. I believe the number was somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 of the faithful throughout the GTA taking advantage of that opportunity. I think in a couple episodes we had talked about going on pilgrimages before, and I hadn't been on one. I still haven't, but I think this year has really opened a lot of people's eyes, mine included, into some of the benefits that these opportunities have, whether that's faith experience, as Quinton was alluding to, or just the communal aspect. And the natural beauty at some of these sites is really incredible. So it's something that whether you're in Rome, you're in Toronto, you're in the greater Toronto area, there's something for everyone. And I think that's great that those opportunities are available.
And of course, the Martyr's Shrine is, the number of pilgrimages that are there every year is outstanding. It's and the different ethnicities within the archdiocese, and of course, probably the biggest is the Filipinos, which is no surprise. But there's huge numbers of Polish people that do this, so it's wonderful, and it's great if you can get onto one of these pilgrimages. Please do. So, but as myself and Quinton prepare ourselves from Rome, we have to take us a little bit away from Rome, not that much farther, and talk about what's happening in Nigeria, where this week U.S. President Donald Trump has designated Nigeria a country of particular concern, mostly because of the persecution of Christians there. And in Donald Trump's inimitable way, he threatens to bring peace with potential military action to protect the persecuted Christians. Uh, Quinton, I know you've spoken several times with Bishop Wilfred Anagbi from Nigeria about the situation. Tell me about your conversation with him this week.
Thank you, Mickey. Bishop Anagbe, for a little bit of context, was the witness who appeared, in front of the U.S. Congress to testify about the persecution that is happening on the ground. We're talking about 32 Christians being murdered every day in 2025 on average, millions of people displaced from their lands. He's had 25 churches that have been closed in his own particular diocese. And there have been, of course, over 140 priests that have been abducted over the last 10 years. So he really spoke about a smattering of problems. And I spoke to him the first time when there was a big intimidation effort to stop him from talking. It was very unsafe for him to even return to Nigeria. But now he has hope. And he really thinks that there could be some sort of common sense and sanity that could return because of a little bit of a pushback against the obvious Christian persecution. I think we're all seeing what it will mean in terms of the actions that the U.S. might very well take. Yes, a military action is on the table, and the Department of War is preparing for strike scenarios. But sometimes country of particular concern designation could be a pretext for aid and assistance to be pulled. So we are going to really have to see, and sanctions, of course, could be levied against the nation. So we know one thing for sure is that Donald Trump moves very, very quickly. So if the Nigerian government does not want the U.S. forces on the ground, it sounds like they have to move very quickly in course correcting what's happening in Nigeria.
Well, this is something that's really drawn a lot of eyes to our website. It's been probably our biggest story in the last few weeks, and well, here in Canada alone, we do have quite a Nigerian diaspora, and in particular in Toronto. So you can understand why so many people are interested in it. But it's something we've been covering, here at home. We've had our correspondent in Ottawa, Susan Cora. She's written about Christian persecution everywhere, from Armenia, just all over the place. Wherever it happens, she's got a story on it. And it's something that is out there, and there can be no doubt about it. But, and in particular, in this case, in Nigeria, there was a CBC report this week saying, "Oh, this doesn't really stand the test. Christians aren't being persecuted any more than anyone else," which I found absolutely ridiculous. But it's very easy for someone sitting in their office in downtown Toronto to know all these facts, isn't it? So.
Well, all I could say is that it's the deadliest place in the world to be a Christian. If you look at any metrics, it has, Nigeria's Christians have more death than any other country in the world. And all these organizations say between 327 to 400 million Christians are at risk of persecution every year. That is a number that could not be ignored. Your thoughts, Luke?
Yeah, I think you said it best, Quinn. Those are the facts. Those are the stats. And when you hear reporters make comments like that, in complete opposite to what the president of the United States is doing in his actions, I think it lets you know that he's not reporting from the ground. He's not there. He's not seeing what's happening, because, like you said, the statistics are alarming. They're very alarming. And I think we'll be chatting about this more next week as Toronto's Red Wednesday Mass approaches as well, the day for persecuted Christians. I actually had a call with Bishop Bosino today where he said, I said, this is the 10th year we're celebrating Red Wednesday, Aid to the Church in Needs Red Wednesday. How do you think Christian persecution has has it gotten better over the last decade or worse? And without hesitation, he gave me 101 reasons as to why it's gotten worse over the last decade. So it's definitely something that's still there. It's alarming, and we're hoping for change still.
Yeah. Well, the word gets thrown out, and it's unfortunate. It gets thrown out probably a little far, in fact, not a little, but far too much. But there are people who are calling it a genocide. But we'll stay away from that. We just know what the facts are. Right now it is definitely Christian persecution. But if we are going to talk about a genocide, let's talk about the true genocide we've had in recent memory, and that, of course, would be the Holocaust from World War II. And this week we recognize Holocaust Remembrance Week. And Luke, that was one of your stories this week. So tell us what's going on in the city of Toronto concerning Holocaust Remembrance Week.
Yes, I spoke with Dara Solomon. She's the executive director of the Toronto Holocaust Museum. As you had alluded to there, Mickey, this week they're celebrating, or commemorating rather, Holocaust Education Week. Essentially what they're doing is they're specifying their programming at the museum for people looking for ways through, whether it's literature, music, theater, just different, interactive ways to commemorate the Holocaust and its enduring legacy. So they've launched a couple different programs this week. This is something they've been doing for, I think this is the 43rd year that they've adapted sort of this model to direct their programming towards that. On Monday, it was a discussion panel about a new novel regarding Anne Frank, The Many Different Lives of Anne Frank, where they sort of look at her history as a figure of the Holocaust, but shed some light on different areas of her life that people may not be familiar with. Just last night, so on Wednesday, there was a film premiere of Elie Wiesel's Soul on Fire, again, taking a look into the life of one of the figures of the Holocaust and his legacy afterwards. And I believe this Sunday, to wrap up the week on the 9th, they're going to be having a sort of music presentation at a synagogue in Toronto in commemoration of Kristallnacht, where they're going to be sharing some music and songs that were lost during that era of World War II and the Holocaust. And there's actually going to be a Holocaust survivor present for that event as well. So during our conversation, we just sort of chatted about the importance of this, why its lasting legacy is still felt today. And I think the biggest thing for me is we chatted about approaching an era where there are fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors, and why it's so important to have these types of events open, especially for the younger generations. And that was her big point, is that, we're doing this still for a reason. We don't want this lost to time. I don't think it will ever be lost to time, but it certainly helps that these things are available for people to take advantage of.
Well, we certainly hope it won't be lost in time, but we've got our present situation today, and it's been going on for the past 2+ years, since October 7th, 2023, and the rise in anti-Semitism has just been absolutely incredible. And like, who could have foreseen it really being like this? Looking back, say 10 years ago, there's no way I could have predicted that. I don't know about you guys. I know you've both written stories on the anti-Semitism, and in particular, Luke, I know you've been writing about a lot of these pro-Hamas rallies. And let's face it, most of these rallies, they're not for Palestinians. They're pro-Hamas. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes, for sure. We chatted about the effects of this education week in a post-October 7th world, and she said, to be completely honest with you, it wasn't getting the attention in the past 2 years that it normally does, right? Because people were so focused on Israel and what's been going on there. She said this year is looking a little bit like a return to form, I think mainly because people are just interested now in celebrating, whether Jews or non-Jews, that idea of Jewish identity and what Jews carry with them in terms of Holocaust remembrance. Quinton, any thoughts?
Well, I just really appreciate in your story about this education week is that they are recognizing the power of, film, music, and literature. I mean, these are three mediums that really can engender that sense of empathy and could really transport you to a time and place. And I know it's the cliche, but yes, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So I appreciate that they are taking this approach, because at its best, this is what these three avenues can do for people. And especially, as you said, as we're going to have less living survivors, it is going to become the best tool at our disposal to never forget.
And we can never forget. There's the sacrifices of the 6 million. There's probably another 3 million or so Poles, the Roma, so many others who died needlessly. And of course, we have to look back at our fallen soldiers who we remember coming up on Remembrance Day, November 11th. That would be this Tuesday. And that was actually the cover of our paper, our physical paper this week. And what we did was we went back 80 years to the first Remembrance Day after the end of the war. And two stories in particular we grabbed and we put on page. One of them tells the story of Captain Reverend Robert Emmett Lowry, CSB. He'd be the Basilian priest. He's a native of Ottawa who was awarded the Military Cross for distinguished gallantry in the field during the campaign on the Western Front. So we tell a little bit of his story and how much he meant to the troops in his outfit. And he was, as his commander said, he was as much a man who he meant as much to the regiment as anyone that held a gun and actually went into battle and fought. So, and then of course we also grabbed an editorial from we were called the Canadian Register at the time, and the associate editor was Father Gerald Hanley, who wrote in his editorial, "They died for our sake," and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There was these men going about living their lives, and all of a sudden war breaks out, and what did they do? They went and sacrificed so that we could have the Canada and the free world that we have nowadays. So we have to always remember them and always bless them for the sacrifice they made on our behalf.
Mickey, we know that there is a treasure trove of, military journals written by these soldiers. There's military museums across the country, just a whole bevy of resources that could allow us to understand what drove these men and women to be such heroic sacrificers on behalf of their country. I think we need to read what they wrote to get a sense of, what motivated them. We need to internalize it. And we need to make sure that we are taking up the torch of safeguarding what they safeguarded for us so bravely on the front lines of war 80 years ago. It's up to us now, and we can't let our heroes down. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree, Quinton. I think we're so lucky to live in a country where these stories are readily available. And like you said, it's on us to sort of contextualize them and remember them in our own way, right? It can't just be when the poppy bucket shows up at Tim Hortons or at your McDonald's where you go, oh, this is the month where we do that, right? It should be something I think all the time we're thinking about, but especially in this month that we have an effort to continue doing that in a reverence way.
Yes, so please, on November 11th, get out and support your veterans across the country. There's cenotaphs in towns big and small. Please go out and support these people. Well, I'll have to say thank you for tuning in as we wrap up this episode of Registered. I'd like to thank you for joining us. Thanks to Quinton and Luke, and we hope you can join us next time for Registered. Meanwhile, for all your Catholic news, be sure to stay informed at catholicregistered.org. And a big shout out to our friends at Connaissance Travel and Tours for sponsoring this week's episode. Connaissance Travel and Tours is your trusted Catholic-owned and operated Canadian expert in transformative pilgrimage tours. Visit connaissancetravel.com.